I didn't think hauntings or curses existed. Ghost stories seemed to me like the type of cheap thrills you tell youngsters around a campfire to keep the evening lively. Before I scheduled a cruise out of Galveston last year, I believed the trip would only serve as a respite from the stresses of work, bills, and daily life. Long after I got off the ship, I had no idea that the ship itself would come back to haunt me. I'm 34 years old, named Trevor, and I work in HVAC in my native Texas. I don't get frightened easily. You learn to maintain your composure by crawling into dark attics teeming with rats and wasp nests. However, the remembrance of what transpired on that ship still makes my hands shake. The first night at sea was when it all began. Everything felt ideal. The Gulf was serene, and the air was clear. My cousin Jordan and his fiancée Lisa were traveling with me. They had pleaded with me to accompany them since they didn't want to be a third-wheel pair who had no other companions. Why not? I reasoned. 7 days of free food, swimming pools, and perhaps a little adventure. I was forced to stay in an inside room, whereas Jordan and Lisa had lavished on a balcony cabin. The lack of windows and fresh air wasn't a terrible thing. The longer you are in the place, the heavier the air feels. I recall thinking that since I wouldn't be able to see the horizon alter, at least I wouldn't get seasick. However, despite the air conditioner blasting cold air, I woke up sweating that first night. My dream was so vivid that it seemed to have permeated the real world. There was another person standing in my cabin, crammed into the corner where the shadows gathered. I only saw the outline of a person, towering and motionless, observing me, but I couldn't make out a face. The dream figure was gone when I jolted awake, but the icy sense of being watched persisted. I persuaded myself that I was simply worn out from the journey. That is, until things got out of hand the following evening. I went to the buffet deck to get some water, but it was late, maybe 2 in the morning. At night, the ship felt different, empty, nearly motionless. The vast hallways were silent, save for the buzz of the motors beneath my feet, because most people were asleep. I saw someone strolling in front of me as I crossed the atrium, a dark-suited man. There was nothing odd about that, but I could see the rails through him. I initially believed that my eyes were playing tricks on me. I rubbed them and blinked hard, but the man remained. He continued to move slowly and deliberately, as though oblivious to the presence of others. Then he turned a corner without making a sound. I hurried ahead, half thinking I was dreaming. However, the hallway was deserted when I turned the same corner. I should have returned to my cabin and made myself go to sleep at that point because the single door there was marked crew only. But for some reason, I stood there longer, as though I was waiting for him to come back. What I got instead was worse. I heard 3 strong knocks from behind the crew door. Not haphazard, intentional. 3 times, then nothing. Goosebumps crawled up my arms as I retreated. I didn't immediately notify Lisa or Jordan. I didn't want to scare them or, worse, give the impression that I was losing it. No matter where I went though, I couldn't get rid of the feeling that I wasn't alone on that ship. The pictures then began. I made an effort to shake it off the following morning. Everything returned to normal, with the help of coffee, sunlight, and Lisa's laughter through her big sunglasses. The reality of sitting on the balcony, seeing people sip cocktails before midday, and listening to steel drums made it difficult to reconcile the nagging fear I had experienced the previous evening. However, my stomach fell when Jordan took out his phone to show me the pictures he had shot the previous evening. He laughed as he looked through pictures of us making goofy faces at supper, Lisa holding her wine glass, and me feigning to balance bread rolls. He then stopped, scowled, and exclaimed, "Who the heck is this guy?" He swung the phone in my direction. The same man in the suit who I had seen traversing the hall was in the backdrop of one of the pictures, standing just behind our table. A face without expression, slicked hair and pale skin. He was staring at the camera instead of us. "Which man?" Lisa leaned over and asked. Jordan made a point. "He." Lisa peered, cocked her head and dismissed it, saying, "Right here." "No one is there, sweetie." Jordan glanced at me for support, but I remained nothing. "You probably caught a glare or something." Because I could see him clearly as day. I recognized him, not just saw him. I had followed the same man down the hall. I ate very little for breakfast. Every sound seemed more acute, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking, as though the entire ship had gone into alert mode. Jordan called after me when I eventually excused myself, saying, "Hey dude, don't freak Lisa off with any ghost nonsense, okay?" However, the seed was sown. I was no longer able to ignore it. I made a mistake that night. I made the decision to try to capture him again rather than avoid it. While the most of the guests slept, I stayed up late and wandered the peaceful decks. I half expected to convince myself that it was merely poor lighting or a trick of reflection, so I carried my phone like a weapon, camera ready. I ended up back at the same crew-only door after 2 o'clock. The air felt charged, as if it were just before a storm, but the hallway was empty. I held up my phone, pressed record, and muttered, "If you're there, show yourself." Nothing occurred for a second. The only sound was the distant hum of the ship's engines. A faint tapping sound came from behind the door just as I was about to down the phone. There are 3 knocks, the same cadence as before. I went cold. The handle then rotated slowly. I saw it, I swear to God. The door did not open even when the handle was pressed down. In my hands, my camera trembled. I stepped back, then another. The handle then snapped back into position as abruptly as it had appeared. I didn't get any sleep that evening. Every muscle in my body tensed as I sat on the edge of my bed and gazed at the door. It dawned on me then that I was experiencing more than a hallucination. There was intelligence aboard that ship, something that demanded my attention. It wasn't just me, though. The crew announced something over the intercom the following day. Professional and composed, but with an unmistakable hint of stress, "Attention guests. Please alert the crew right away if you have spotted passenger Richard Albright." Jordan arched an eyebrow. "Mr. Albright hasn't been seen since yesterday evening. Strange. Is there someone missing already?" Lisa dismissed it with a laugh. I didn't laugh, though. Probably just drunk and sleeping it off somewhere, since Richard Albright's name sounded familiar. Too much like home. I looked at the pictures once again that evening, and I understood why. Richard Albright was the man wearing the suit. The sole issue? He passed away 20 years prior. After hearing the announcement, I was unable to remain motionless. I was devoted to my phone, looking through the ship's poor Wi-Fi for any tidbit of information I could discover about Richard Albright as Jordan and Lisa went to the pool. Initially, there were only a few arbitrary names and mismatched obituaries. Then I discovered it, hidden in an old forum post. I scrolled down to a forum called "Accidents at Sea They Don't Tell You About," and I froze when I noticed the entry for passenger Richard Albright, age 43, from 1999. Fell overboard during a rumored altercation with his spouse. The body never came back. The message concluded with a terrifying detail. Days after he was said to have disappeared, other people claimed to have seen him. Some said he was in their pictures. My heart was racing. He was that person. The man in the suit was that one. My thumb cramped as I quickly closed the browser. In the dark screen, my reflection appeared ghostly and pale. The truth tore at me, even though I swore myself I wouldn't tell Jordan and Lisa. I asked if one of them had heard of Richard Albright during dinner that evening. Jordan laughed. Lisa rolled her eyes and said, "Dude, you sound like you've been reading conspiracy forums." "Your ghost crap is starting to frighten me. I wanted to let it go. I wanted to, God." However, I was unable to, not when he continued to appear. It began modestly, a peek at the throng by the buffet line. As we passed the casino, we caught a glimpse of his reflection in the glass. Standing there, watching, all the while. In the same gray suit, every time. Then, the picture appeared. Lisa was enjoying a margarita on deck when Jordan snapped this candid photo of her. Later, Lisa screamed and almost dropped the phone when he showed us. Because Richard was standing just inches away over her shoulder, half in shadow. The issue was that none of us had really seen him there. Jordan chuckled uneasily. "All right, that's eerie, but perhaps it just appears strange since a guy photobombed it." "No, Lisa said in a murmur, her face devoid of color. I had no sense of who was behind me. I would have known. Lisa wouldn't leave the cabin that night. Even Jordan, who accused me of being neurotic, refrained from re-examining the pictures. I made an effort to sleep, but about 3 o'clock I awoke to the rattling of my cabin door handle. Slowly, as if it were being tested from the outside. Frozen in the darkness, I sat up. The noise ceased. Silence for a long time. A voice then came weakly through the door. I held my breath and said, "Let me in." It was a quiet, low, almost courteous voice. However, no living person owned it. "Give me entry," it said again. I staggered back, my heart thumping. My phone was charging across the room, too far away to reach without going over the shadow of the door. This time, the handle rattled more forcefully. I thought it would turn completely, but then there was stillness. I never slept again. I was prepared to plead for a cabin move when I went to the reception counter the following morning. "Sir, don't worry." The staff member responded with a tight smile before I could even open my mouth. "We'll monitor the situation." I was very chilled by the way she stated, "Just stay with your friends," as if she knew already. As I turned to go, I saw a wall of framed pictures of notable guests from previous decades behind the counter. I fixed my gaze on one in particular. Albright, Richard. He and his wife were standing. They each gave the camera a rigid smile. June 1999 was the date on the picture. Almost imperceptible, a water stain was spreading throughout the picture at the bottom corner of the frame, as if the image itself were drowning. I was falling apart by that point. I was afraid I would see him, so I flinched at every shadow and looked twice at every reflection. I reasoned that I could be safer if I held on to Jordan and Lisa. However, he was not deterred by sticking together. We attended the gala in the main ballroom that evening. Glasses clinking, music rising, everyone decked out to the nines. I allowed myself to act as though nothing was wrong for a while. The air was filled with laughing, couples dancing, and sparkling chandeliers. Then I noticed a guy at the far end of the room, standing still. Richard. Not mixing, not grinning, looking at me through the throng. He vanished when I blinked, engulfed by the dancers. Lisa saw my face. "Don't," she said sharply, holding onto my arm. "Avoid saying it. Don't draw attention to him." Her voice wavered, and I knew she had also seen him. Just don't. The three of us left early and made our way back through the silent corridors. With fewer people out and fewer voices echoing, the ship appeared to be more empty than it should have been. The weirdness weighed heavily on my chest, but I thought perhaps the hour was late. Jordan returned to their cabin and attempted to lighten the mood. "All right, have a look. In the worst scenario, this is just a strange superstition, isn't it? Ghost stories, paranoid minds, and an old ship. We endure it." However, Lisa was not amenable. "No, Jordan, he is genuine. Last night, I sensed him behind me. When I combed my hair, the mirror..." She halted, trembling. He was present. The ship's hum pressed in, as we all sat in silence, right behind me. Then I became aware of something that gave me the chills. I muttered, "Have you seen how no one else responds? No one murmurs about him or looks at him. We alone." Jordan scowled. "What are you saying, then?" "I believe." My throat went dry. "I believe we are the only ones who can see him." I eventually made myself go to sleep that night. However, I awoke about 4 a.m. to the cracking sound of the announcement system. It wasn't the captain's voice. It was smooth, low, and strangely serene. "Updated passenger manifest. There is still one space." My gut grew numb. I sprinted barefoot into the corridor. The lights were dimmed to a sickly yellow tint, and the corridor was deserted. Then I noticed it, stuck beneath my door like a receipt from room service. A sheet of folded paper. I knelt down, my hands trembling. I unfolded it. It said, "Cabin 422. Reserved my cabin number," in clean, written letters. In my ears, my blood roared. Abruptly, footsteps resounded from the hallway. Slow, steady, too methodical. I didn't hold out. I slammed the door of my cabin, pushed myself up against it, and ran back inside. Just across the street, the footsteps ceased. For what seemed like hours, there was silence. Then, softly, the same serene voice said, "It's time." I remained up until dawn, holding the paper tightly, aware that something was about to happen but helpless to stop it. I didn't feel like it was dawn. The same sterile, recycled brightness came through the curtains, but the sunshine never made it to my cabin. I tried to eat breakfast at the buffet after taking a shower and getting dressed, but the food tasted like cardboard. His reverberation could be heard in every spoon clink and ship creak. I was greeted on deck by Jordan and Lisa. Their pale, sleep-deprived eyes were worse than mine. At first, we were quiet, simply stood and pretended to observe the boundless horizon. At last, Lisa muttered, "He won't stop, will he?" I gave a head shake. I gripped the folded paper that was still in my pocket tightly. Cabin 422, booked. It burned like a warning against my thigh, but I didn't want to show them. The ship declared a mandatory muster drill for that afternoon. Under the direction of crew members wearing clipped smiles, passengers filed toward the lower decks. The air was heavy, incorrect, and seemed to be moving automatically. Jordan leaned closer. "Have you noticed anything?" he whispered. "Yes, I did. Too many seats are unfilled. Life jackets were spread out in rows, but nobody was wearing them. No one appeared to care that entire groups of travelers were absent and unaccounted for. Then I noticed him in the mix of bodies. Richard. Not a passenger, not in uniform, standing against the bulkhead. There, just there." Through the bustle, he gave me a slight smile as he cocked his head. The intercom roared the captain's voice. "As is customary, ladies and gentlemen, we express our gratitude for your safe journey." The words stuck in my head like a thorn. Tonight, we sail in perfect balance once again. Ideal equilibrium. I seized Jordan and Lisa and pulled them to the far end of the deck as soon as we were dismissed. I showed them the document because I could no longer contain it. The color left their faces. "Your room is that one," Jordan muttered. "Reserved," Lisa remarked in an almost perceptible voice. "For him." The night came quickly and heavily. Even if I didn't want to return to my cabin, it didn't matter. A knock on the door occurred at 11:55 p.m. 3 savage raps. I went cold. The clock on my watch reached midnight. Another knock, a little more slowly. From the other end, Richard's voice said, "Time." The lock swung. It was untouchable by me. The door opened by itself. He smiled as if we were longtime friends as he stood in the threshold. The light made his skin appear overly pale and smooth, like wet wood. I could no longer see the hallway behind him. I saw rows of cabins that went on forever, bathed in gentle blue light. Inside those spaces, shapes shifted, pale, drowned in waiting faces pressed against the glass windows. Richard held out his hand. "You don't struggle with it. You board." I hesitated in response. Why me? As if to rip his face in two, his smile grew wider and split at the corners. Because the ship cannot sail without a complete manifest. The air became oppressively moist and heavy. My lungs ached as if I were already submerged. My cabin's walls were dripping with salt water. Seconds earlier, there were no puddles where my feet now sloshed. Behind him, Jordan banged on the door and called my name, but his voice was muffled and far away, like though he were speaking through a thick pane of glass. There was silence for a moment after Lisa's scream broke through. Richard moved forward, scuffing the carpet with his damp sneakers. The temperature dropped to cold as soon as he touched my shoulder. My breathing was hazy. "Hello, welcome home," he murmured. The room fell apart. Into water, not into the dark. The ship above me was disappearing into the darkness as I fell and sank. Passengers glided by me, their eyes open, their mouths moving as if they were whispering secrets that would never be revealed. Richard's face, which was visible while underwater, was the last thing I saw before everything turned black. Calm and sure, his mouth moved. there is still one vacancy. I still can't recall how I awoke on land. They claimed that nothing out of the ordinary occurred and that the ship docked normally. However, the cruise line claimed that there were no passengers with those names on the list when I inquired about Jordan and Lisa. Weeks later, I looked up the passenger list online in a leaked copy. There was my name. There was one word beside it, in little letters: unoccupied.